students in town, on campus, everywhere, had gotten people to think about this differently. And Joe Smith was one of those main people. So, I have a funny story about that. So, you didn't have to. You can take incomplete, right? We need to make up the work. You can make up the work later, or you can take the grade you had. Or you can sit in and finish the semester and take an exam. I have a funny story about Joe at this point. So, it goes, and this is why people didn't like Joe. It goes, and they come. If you want to go, you can go. So people are still holding classes, right? Joe wants to make sure they know they're right. So he organizes a group of students, of a handful, and they go from classroom to classroom. Can you imagine this? They go from classroom to classroom. They come into the class, the teacher's in class, and they tell students, do you understand you don't have to be here? And they read this. Needless to say, some faculty were unhappy with it. Let me tell you today, if somebody's in my class, I'd kick them out. Different time, different role, different place. I'm running behind. Joe was interested in civil rights and poverty. He worked with the Catholic Interracial Council. We worked, in those days in the city of Rock Island, you could discriminate against black folks or whoever you wanted in renting hot property to them. There was no open housing law in the city of Rock Island in 1967, 1968. Absolutely shameful. And so, we organized around that too. I remember one day, Sunday day, I can't remember exactly when, and I can't find the picture of this, that a group of us left here, organized students left here, went to Rock Island to cross the Centennial, and then joined some people from Rock Island, Catholic Interracial Council and others, and we had a demonstration in front of City Hall and a sit-in. And then they started arresting people. And then they said, if you came across the bridge, you are in violation of the federal statute for crossing state lines to riot. You will be arrested and put in federal prison. That seems severe to us. What would you have done? Me too. So we got up and came back to Ambrose. Live to fight another day. Live to fight another day. At that point, too, Joe went to live at the Catholic Workers' House, the Omega House, founded by Chuck Welty. Chuck, you want to stand up? Wave at them. This is Chuck. Catholic Worker House. It's called the Omega House. Omega is the symbol for resistance. Okay? And it's a house dedicated to voluntary poverty and serving the poor. And originally they had a convent. They had an abandoned convent in Rock Island. And there was a group of people who staffed that. Joe was one of them. And they took in homeless people and alcoholics and drug people, people that didn't have any place to go or any place to stay, and tried to provide a safe place for them to stay and food and shelter for them. And when possible, some counseling about how to go to work. Of course, none of the people at Omega House were working, so that counsel was, probably not the best. I'm just kidding. Somewhere, when I first came here, I was deeply interested in the plight of what was going on in California, the farm workers, and I, in addition to spending some time on the picket line against the war, I spent some time on the picket line on the Great Boycott. And Joe got very interested in that early and got involved with it. And his interest got deeper and deeper and deeper. And once again, we're doing hardcore street work, handing out leaflets, talking to people one-on-one. Joe came to the attention of the Farm Workers Union out in California, and they were sending organizers around. This is Trejo, isn't it? It is. I think it's Richard Trejo. He looks like Joe's brother, doesn't he? Separated at birth. So we were walking picket lines at Giefman's and AMP, Aldi's is in the AMP, where the AMP is. AMP is where Aldi's is now. And then Geekman's was down like 2 blocks away, so it was an easy to organize. And then we hooked up with lots of Mexican-American labor leaders and Mexican-American other leaders. A quick side note on this, my wife is Dolores. I actually met her father before I met her. We walked the picket lines together during Great Boycott. And Joe became deeply fascinated by that. I have to go through this quickly. I'm way behind. I had no idea how much this was. Joe worked for the paper Sack. He had a column in 70, 71. In 1970, during that, remember the Kansas Stoic turmoil? Things were way up in the air. They didn't know what to do. We had achieved a level of student power unheard of, and we argued for and won an election to run the student newspaper, rather than have the publications board do it. We had a student-wide election on it. First time in history of the student, and the last time, because of who they elected. That would be Joe and I. We knew how to organize, we knew how to get people out to do stuff, and so we won going away. And then we saw the paper as a platform for stimulating political and social change. One of the first acts was to tell the York Force, thanks, but no thanks, we don't need your money. At that point, a group of people on campus organized to unseat us. We found out later behind the scenes that one faculty member in particular, maybe 2, were writing the letters for the students, passing them out in class and asking them to sign them. Once we exposed that, that collapsed. The paper, if you look at the paper in those days, half the paper was letters to the editor. People in favor of what's going on, people against what's going on, raising controversies every week. It was a hoot. You couldn't wait to get to the paper. Couldn't wait to get to the paper. And we published everything. Call us names, say we're communists, say we're anarchists, say anything, it still got in there. No, it's just wide open. Everybody gets to say, because we're interested in the controversies. This is the staff from those days. I put it up here because a couple of interesting things. This is Professor Water Street. Anybody have Professor Water Street in the psych department? That's her. Yeah, she was a babe. That's her. This is Joe, and this is me. Really? I know. I'm shocked. I had to read the line. Who the hell is that? Oh crap, it's me. The guy in the middle up here, Tom Pashank, graduates, this is 1971, graduates in 71, gets drafted immediately, sent to Vietnam, is blinded, comes home, a year later kills himself. That's why this is up here too. All right, Smith graduates in 71, spends a year at J.B. Young, decides this is not possible, and gets interested in the grape and lettuce boycotts in California, and so joins La Causa. This is a picture of Joe in Chicago, leading a boycott in Chicago. He got there, Chester Ruiz, doesn't mean anything to you, but means something to us, recruited Joe and Jim Conway, Ambrose grad, part of the peace movement, Aledo farm boy, to go to Chicago and organize Chicago. Later they're joined by Tom Kilbright. Tom, stand up and wave. You won't like this, but I'm going to tell you anyway, okay? Because I don't care what Tom likes. But it's reciprocated because Tom doesn't care what I like. Tom's an Illinois Supreme Court Justice. Okay? How do you do this stuff, right? You do this stuff by getting involved in stuff like this. Okay? So, they all are up there. Joe is handed, he goes to Chicago, they say, organize the North Side. You're in charge of the North Side of Chicago. Get this done. Conway's given the South Side. You're in charge of the South Side. Get this done. So George's responsible to organize lettuce boycotts, and Conway's organizing lettuce boycotts on the South Side, and they target AMP, and they make AMP relent. The great Atlantic and Pacific relent, and they get the lettuce off the shelves. Joe was paid room, board, $5 a week, and all the beans and rice you could eat. They were also expected to organize for their own expenses, which Joe complained about bitterly. He didn't care whether he liked you or not. You know, he wasn't getting enough to eat. What's the organizing like? House to house, door to door, meeting to meeting. Getting the word out, convincing people of the justice of the cause of farm workers in the field. Get volunteers, go picket A and P on Saturday, get them to relent. And they did it. It's grindingly tough, emotionally exhausting work. People are angry at you, they tell you no, they spit on you, they punch you. You do it enough, you do it long enough, you do it enough places, enough people go on the picket line with you, and you can make A&P relent. Joe was arrested a few times for trespass and obstruction. In 1974, the union says, we need you to leave Chicago, go to San Diego. So Joe and Tom get in the great green Beetle. This is a model, not the actual one you had, Tom. And drive to San Diego. They're working on the Gallo line boycott, and at that time they're working on public support for labor legislation to protect farm workers. And Jerry Brown was governor at that time. Jerry Brown's governor of California today. How weird is that? In California, they meet and are trained in a more extensive House method by Fred Ross Sr., the guru of community organizing, together with Alinsky. And this is Fred Ross. There. His name will come up again. In 76 and 77, Joe goes to work at the union headquarters in La Paz, helps with labor legislation protecting farm workers. He's going out now into the fields with farm workers and getting them to sign union pledge cards. Cesar, finding out that he was the editor of the school newspaper, obviously he had to look at it, appoints Joe to run the paper. But at this point, we're not sure quite exactly what happened. Opinions vary. But Joe and Cesar had a falling out, and Cesar fires him from the job at El Macreado, one issue, and asks him to leave. Miriam Powell, in her book, explains what she thinks happened, but that's just her opinion. We're not sure. Tom, who was around, doesn't know for sure what happened, and Jim doesn't know what happened, and Joe didn't talk about it because even though I think he got screwed by Cesar, he had the loyalty not to say. So we don't know what happened. Joe comes back here, works for Vince Thomas, another area giant that you don't know who he is, and forms the Community Caring Conference, becomes the first director. 150 block clubs, door to door, neighborhood by neighborhood, to organize people in the neighborhoods to look after themselves, to promote the health of the neighborhoods. It used to be a pariah when he first started it. Joe's learning, he's growing, he's developing. It becomes a full partner in Rock Island and changes the way Rock Island sees the inner city neighborhoods. Okay? And it becomes a model for other kinds of neighborhood organizations. It's again hard, grinding, person to person, door to door, house to house, block by block organizing. That's what it meant to be a leader. That's what it meant to be a leader. And then you can get 150 blocks. And then you do it again the next day. And the next day, and the next day, and the next day. Better dig in. From there, Joe had a larger vision. He hoped to merge two community organizations together to have a Quad City-wide organization to increase the power and influence of poor and moderate income people living in the inner cities of Davenport and Rock Island. Unfortunately, he was not able to pull that off. In 1987, his vision gets larger. He wants